Apple TV represents an exciting new platform for the Xamarin developer and should be an easy transition for developers already using Xamarin.iOS. However, several key UI elements found in iOS, like the UI switch, are unavailable in tvOS. In this video, we'll show how to design a custom UI switch control in the third-party Paintcode product that we will then bring to life in Xamarin.tvOS. Before I actually start laying out a control in Paintcode, I like to sit down with pencil and paper and kind of design out the look and feel. So here we have a UI switch that we're going to make that has 3 different states: on, off, and in focus. And to match the rest of the tvOS UI, as the control becomes in focus, we change the color of the text and make the thumb larger. That should make it fit and feel in with the rest of the system. In our new Paintcode project, we're going to name our canvas UI Flip Switch. Then we're going to set the size to 250 and the height to 100. Now we're going to select a rectangle, and this is going to act as the background of the control. I'm just going to pop it in, set our rounding radius to 4, and adjust the X and Y coordinates. Next, we're going to adjust the width and the height. This will give us a little breathing room for when our control grows as it gets in focus. Now we're going to define a few colors that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a bunch of different colors for the different states of the component, like its standard color if it's on. Here we're going to be defining a green color. Next, we're going to define a color for when the control loses focus and make it a little bit translucent. It's going to be the same color we defined before, but just with some translucency embedded in it. Again, this makes us fit in with the rest of the fit and feel of tvOS. So we're going to define a few more colors. Again, following that same principle. We're just trying to define colors for every single state that the component can be in and all the different pieces that will form this UI element. So here we're defining the color for when the control is turned to the off state and in focus. And again, just like we did with the on color, we're going to make a slightly translucent version of this exact same color. So just set the values to the same as the off color when it's in focus, and again, turn down our alpha component. With all our colors defined, now we're going to define a slight shadow element that we're going to use inside the component's UI. So we pick our shadow color that we already defined, set our offsets, and now we're going to define some parameters that we're going to be using. So the first one is when the component gets in focus. We need to tell everything about that. And again, this is going to be passed as a parameter. The next one we need is when our switch is in the on state. Again, we're passing this as a parameter by default. And for some different things, we're going to need to know when the switch is off, so we're just going to make an expression, take our passed in on parameter, and just negate it. Now we're going to add an expression that's going to define the background color of our gutter, which is the area that the thumb will slide in based on the states that we just passed in before. So we say if the switch is on and the switch is in focus, we want to give off our on in focus color. Else we want the on non-focused color. We're going to do the same thing for when the switch is in the off setting. So again, if it's off, we want to, and in focus, we want to give the background the off in focus color. If it's out of focus, we want to do the other. And if you notice, the color automatically popped up in the little preview window over here. Now we're going to connect this to the gutter and make it its fill color. With that connected, I can flip these switches and you'll see it change state. And now we're going to connect our shadow, and we want the inner shadow for our gutter. Now we're going to add a text element that's going to be the words for the on and off. So we're going to do the on first. We put in the value. We want it centered, We do a bold font and 27. Now we adjust the XY position and the height and width. We're going to duplicate this text and drag it over, and we're going to make the off the same way. Again, adjusting our position. Now we're going to name our label and have it only be visible when the switch is in the on state. We're going to do the same thing with our off text. And again, this should only be visible when the switch is off. With this defined, I can come over here and flip my states, and we can see that the text is actually responding correctly. Now we want to make a new expression. And when the text is in focus, we want it to be white. When it's out of focus, we want it to be black. So we are looking at the in-focus variable. And we return our in-focus text color that we defined before, or the out-of-focus text color when it loses focus. With these defined, we now wire these up to the text properties and select the text color. Do the same with the off. And again, if we play with our switches over here, we can see that the text is actually responding as we want, changing state with the switch. Now we're going to add another rectangle, and this is going to act like the thumb of the switch that shows its state when it's on and off. Name it thumb. Adjust the rounding radius to 4. Adjust our X and Y location and our width and height. Now we're going to attach a shadow, and we want this to be on the outer edge. And we're going to make a new expression to change the color of the thumb based on the in-focus, out-of-focus state. So we say in-focus. We return our predefined in-focus color. And if you notice I have a little error here, we'll fix that. And then we're going to return the out-of-focus color. With this defined, we're going to wire it up to the thumb, and color should change. Now we're going to add another expression, and we're going to use this to define the X position of the thumb based on its on-off state. So we say if the switch is on, we're going to give one value, and if it's off, we're going to give another. So now we're going to wire this up again to the X property, and we can test here and see that the switch bounces back and forth like we want it to. Now we also want the thumb to grow when the switch is in focus, so we're going to add another expression. So we're going to adjust the thumb height. We're looking again to say when it is in focus, we have one value, and when it is out of focus, we have another. We're going to add one more expression for the Y to adjust for that height change. And we're going to do the same thing. Now we're going to wire both of these up to the height and to our Y position. And we can come over here and play with the states. And now you see the control is fully functional. With our control all defined, we're going to go back up and select it. Make sure that we're exporting it as a drawing method. We're going to go to our StyleKit. We are going to enter a name for our StyleKit. The project name here will control what your namespace is going to be. So we're just going to use UIKit. Change the company name. Hit export. It gives us a chance to change these values again, export, and find a location on our drive where we wish to export the code to. So now we're going to switch over into Xamarin Studio. We're going to start a new tvOS app, single view app. We're going to give it a name. the next button, pick a location. You can leave it at the default if you like. I'm going to leave the default name. With that done, we're going to add a folder just to group everything together and make it nice and pretty. I'm going to call this UIKit. And then I am going to right-click on the folder and select Add Files. And I'm going to add the code that we exported from PaintCode. So we select a file, we open it to include, we're going to copy it in. tvOS handles core graphics a little different than iOS, so we're going to select Add again and add a few little helper files in that will help this code run correctly on tvOS. With those files included, we can just take a quick look at them. They're just some simple extension methods. Now we're going to go to the code we imported from PaintCode, and we're going to add a little conditional programming to say if we're on tvOS, we want to use the alias that we just imported. And the reason we're doing it like this instead of actually changing the code from PaintCode is if we need to make changes in PaintCode and re-export, instead of having to edit the project each time, it's easier just to add this little bit of conditional code at the top. Makes it simpler. So we'll finish up with the font as well. And we're going to close out our if-then statement. Now we're going to add a new file. And we're going to call it UI flip switch. We're going to add some using statements that we're going to require. And because this is a control, we're going to inherit from UI control. And we're going to register this with the OS. I like using regions to define the sections of my classes. Kind of adds another element of commenting. We have one other constructor that's going to be required. So we're just going to copy this one, paste it in. And we're requiring this one so when we switch over to Interface Builder, this will actually tie in together. Here from the base class, pass our handle in. Now we're going to define some necessary private variables. One to keep the state of our switch. So it's going to be Boolean, saying whether it's on or off. And we're setting the default to off. We're going to throw in some computed properties. And the first one of these is going to be the value, again, the on or off state of the switch. I'm going to call it value. When we get it, we're just going to return our backing variable. And when we set the value, we want the actual visual of the switch to change. So we're going to save that backing value. Here from the value variable passed in. And then we're going to set needs display on the control just to make the graphic update. And that'll cause it to redraw. Now we're going to add some override methods. And we're going to override the draw function on the control. And we're going to call the StyleKit that we created in PaintCode. This will actually draw our switch just like we designed it in PaintCode. select our draw method. The focused variable is built into a UI control, and it says whether the control was in or out of focus, and now we're passing in the value we just defined. So we need to tell the control that it can gain focus, so we're going to override a method here, property actually. And we're just always going to go ahead and return true for this, because we always want the component to be able to be focused. Now we're going to define an event so that we in code later on can see when the control gains or loses focus. We're going to use a standard event handler, and we're going to say value changed for our event. Now we're going to define a method, a helper method, that will raise this event whenever we change the value, keeping this one internal. We look to see if the event has been attached by testing for null. If it's not null, we go ahead and call the event. We send ourselves as the sender and empty event args for now. Now we're going to override a few methods that allows the user to interact with the component. The press began, and we're going to go through the presses that get returned to us. We're going to look at the type of press. And what we're looking for is the user making a selection, actually clicking the touch area on the Siri remote. And if we see that, we're going to flip our switch state. And we're going to raise the value change event. So according to Apple, if you override any of the presses events methods, you should override all 4 of them. So we're going to do the canceled. And we're going to do changed. And we're going to get ended. We have one other override that we're going to need, and this is going to be for when the component changes focus. And again, we're just going to force it to redraw itself so it always has the correct state. I'll do this by setting needs display. Okay, now we're going to edit our storyboard, and we're going to do this in Xcode's Interface Builder. I'm going to open that up. It'll take it a second, open everything in Xcode, and get Interface Builder started. So we're going to put a few labels in, so let's just filter and find label. Drag it onto the design surface, give us some room, go set its properties, define its value first. Option 1. Now we're going to set the font, we'll make it bold, and 36. Adjust spacing, and make a copy. Make that 2. And do the same thing for option 3. Now we're going to define a view on the control, and we're going to use that to be our switch here in a moment. Drag one in. Let's go over first and adjust its size, make it the same 250 by 100 that we designed the control for. You Want to go over to the properties now. The background's white. You really don't want that. You want it to be clear so that we can show through. And we're going to go pick our UI class that we just defined. So UI flip switch. With that done, we're going to make a couple copies. Go ahead and space everything out. Now let's wire up some outlets. Select that, change your view. Make sure we're on the H version of the file. Select the control click to drag over, and we're going to call this option 1. Do the same thing with the other two. And finally option 3. Save the changes to your storyboard, and let's switch back to Xamarin Studio. This lets everything sync up. Now we want to open our view controller. We're going to double click on it in the Solution Explorer, and we're going to set the initial values for our switches. So pick switch 1, set its value. We're going to make it default to on. We're going to make the second one default to off. And now we're going to wire up to monitor the change of the first switch. So we look at our event we created, our value changed. And we're just going to write that to the console for right now. So every time the value changes, we're going to go into the console, say which switch it is, and actually output a value. Okay, with all these changes in place, we're ready to run our project and see our switch in place. We're going to make sure we've got the Apple TV simulator selected. I'm going to start the simulator. It's going to build. And then the simulator will watch and come to the surface. We're just going to wait for our app to start. And once it does, we're going to go up and turn on the remote. And you can see we can click the switch on and off. We can move to different switches and you see them change state and the thumb get bigger in color. And everything is working just exactly like we designed it in paint code. Thank you for watching this video guide on creating custom UI controls for tvOS in Xamarin.tvOS. For more information, please visit developer.xamarin.com, guides, iOS, tvOS.